Hey, thanks for coming back to the channel, Andrew at BTO Range in Conroe, Texas. Today on the table we have a discontinued shotgun from Browning. It's not super old, but it had a long production run. It's the Browning BPS, Bravo Papa Sierra. Stands for Browning Pump Shotgun, so they didn't have to look too far to come up with a name for the gun. So we see this gun. Now, it wasn't Browning's first pump shotgun, obviously. John Browning designed the Winchester 1893, and then the improved version, the 1897. And he had other pump shotgun designs while he was also doing his semi-auto gun, the Browning, what would become the Browning Auto 5. But the Remington Model 17 is basically a Browning design, and that once that patent expired from Remington, Ithaca made some changes. It became the Ithaca 37. So there is some lineage of pump action shotguns with John Browning, but John Browning didn't have really much to do with this one, although there are some similarities and some design features from his earlier work in it. So we see the development of this gun began about 1975, and Browning was wanting a slide action shotgun to compete with obviously the Remington 1100 or Remington 870. It's been a long day already. The Remington 870, the Ithaca 37, and the Mossberg 500 were the three big players in the pump shotgun realm in the 70s, and Browning wanted to play also. So they developed this gun, and it has some carryovers, if you will, from the previous Browning designs. It's bottom eject and bottom feed, so there's no ejection port on either side of the shotgun. And the safety is a top tang safety, similar to where you'd find it on a Mossberg 500. So with all that said, the shotgun was uniquely usable by both right or left-handed shooters fairly easily. So there wasn't any need to have, like for instance in the Remington 870, the left-handed version of the 870, there wasn't a need to tool up for another receiver type when the left-handed shooter could use this gun fairly well just as it came out of the box. So we see it debut in the 1977 Browning catalog in 12 gauge, and it was available in a field gun. It was available in a trap gun with an even higher rib, and then it was available in a Buck Special, which was a plain barrel gun with rifle sights, shoulder barrel for deer hunting. And the gun stayed in the line from 77 until it was discontinued in 2024. So discontinued relatively recently. It discontinued last year, all versions. During the course of its run, it was chambered in everything from 10 gauge, 12 gauge 3.5, 12 gauge 3-inch, 16 gauge, 20 gauge, 28 gauge, and 410. They were all chambered in the Browning BPS. And to do that, they made various different receiver sizes. The 10 gauge at 3.5-inch 12 were initially on the same receiver. I think the 3.5 12 at some point got a little bit smaller receiver, different from the standard 12 gauge receiver. And the 20 gauge, 16 gauge receiver, I believe those were different from each other. And the 28 and 410 were the same external size, but obviously some parts different on the inside to accommodate the different diameter of the shell. But that said, they didn't just take one receiver and try to chamber everything in it, because that would have been an insanely heavy 20 gauge, for example. And probably the biggest complaint about this gun is its heaviness. It's a steel receiver gun. This is steel and walnut. Now, over the course, there were I don't know how many different variations of this gun. Synthetic stock guns, camo pattern guns, gloss finish guns, satin finish guns, different barrel lengths, and all that. But they were all steel receiver guns. So there's always been a little bit of weight. So probably the biggest complaint about the BPS over the course of its production has been the weight. But when it was introduced in '77, it had features that the other guns didn't have. We have cut checkering here instead of the press checkering that you would see, for example, on the Remington 870 of the time, and no checkering on the Mossberg 500 at the time. You had the gloss finish. You had the free-floating rib. You had and the bottom ejection, which was unique. It wasn't unique for the 37, but there's a few differences there as well. It made this kind of a standout and actually a decent value for what the gun was. When it was introduced, it was a little over $200 at MSRP in 1977. So it was a reasonable price, I guess, if you will, for the time. So the gun was produced by Moroku in Japan since its inception. Browning had been having shotguns or having guns of all types produced in Japan since the 60s. And so there's no such thing as a Belgian Browning BPS. They're all Moroku made in Japan. But that said, it's still a top quality gun. There's no back seat because it's made in Moroku at all. So we see the bottom feed and eject, right, with the top tank safety for the left hand. And now there's the carrier in this system is much like the Ithaca carrier. So let's clear the gun, show you what I'm talking about. And there's a couple of features on the inside that we probably should talk about also. So obviously there's no ejection port other than the bottom to look through. So this is the action slide lock here, this button behind the trigger guard. So we'll push that down. And when we push that down, you notice this is the carrier. It's a forked carrier. It's not a solid carrier, which may make it somewhat difficult if you want to try to feed those little shorty Aguilar, little shorty Federal shot shells through it. This may not be the gun for you. And then when the action is closed, that carrier pulls up out of the way, so this is completely open here. So that makes the gun relatively easy to unload because this shell stop on this side has a very pronounced button right there that you could push in with your thumb and take the shells out of the magazine. So it wasn't necessary to run the shells through the action. So watch what happens. The carrier on this gun, much like the other bottom feeding or bottom loading shotguns, that I hate to say it's not a bottom feeder, right? So bottom loading is probably a better term. So when the action's operated, as the extractor pulls the case out of the chamber, this carrier serves to push it out and get it out of the way, and it serves as the ejector. There's no separate ejector in the shotgun. And then the new shell feeds onto the top of the carrier, and the carrier lifts it and places it on into the chamber. So it's kind of a dual function piece. So having said that, a lot of people have expressed concerns, especially trap shooters, that it's difficult to single load the BPS, but it's really not. All you have to do is once you're here and you've ejected the shell, if you wanted to single load the chamber, all you have to do is move this up just enough to where the carrier, you only move it up about an inch, the carrier comes all the way up, and that allows you to go all the way into the chamber with the new shell. So it's relatively easily done once you get the hang of where to position this forend. It could be accommodated quite easily. So it's really a non-concern if you're shooting trap or clays or something where you want to possibly single load around into the chamber. So that can work. So during the course of its production, one of the variants was called the Micro Midas, which was their version basically of a youth gun. And they had other youth synthetic guns, and they had the Micro Midas, which was a glossy gun with the short stock and the shorter barrel. So what would you expect to pay for one of these. And it really depends. The value, and I look today at closed auctions and what these guns are actually selling for on the secondary market, as opposed to what people are asking for. I mean, it's two completely separate things, what people ask for and what people actually can get for it. But the 12 gauge gun typically is sub $500 in a lot of cases. A lot of them have seen quite a bit of use. And then the money goes way down with that. But the 12 gauge guns typically don't bring a whole lot of money. You can get them for that $500 mark pretty easily. But as the gauge goes down, the money goes up. 410s, only made a couple of years in this gun, are realistically bringing $1,200 or more in 410, very close to that in 28 gauge, $1,000 bill. And up. 16 gauge will bring a premium. And the 20 gauge and 12 gauge are obviously the most common ones. So it's going to make a difference which version. The synthetic stock versions typically bring less. The 10 gauge still brings good money too. So I think we did a video about a year ago or a little longer on the 10 gauge in general. We discussed the BPS and 10 gauge during that video. So the 12 gauge guns typically don't bring that much, and they represent a really good solid buy for an all steel receiver 12 gauge dual action bar, super smooth gun. And if you can deal with the weight. Now, if you're going to be walking behind dogs, hunting dove or quail all day long, the gun may be a bit heavy than other models, or heavier than other models, and it's a pump gun, not a semi-auto. So do you want to carry a Beretta A300 or an A400? Maybe that'd be, or a Benelli lighter gun. That's personal preference thing. I still like walnut and wood, more classic, and I still hunt with a pump shotgun, Model 12s. I wouldn't hesitate to use a Browning BPS. I don't own one currently, so, and I sold my last Ithaca 37s, but I did enjoy those guns as well. So let me bring up another feature. During the 90s on the Browning BPS, during the 1990s, they offered kind of a step up from the standard field guns that they were engraved. So there was a full panel of engraving on both sides of this receiver, which makes sense because it's just a big flat canvas. So it's kind of makes sense to have it engraved. And depending on what gauge, it was a different bird scene, basically. And those receiver engraving patterns were designed by a man named Michael Collins, who is a excellent engraver, excellent artist, still active today, still working. And what we see on the interwebs, if you're looking for Browning BPS shotguns, you'll see it say a Michael Collins edition, Michael Collins this, Michael Collins that. And some of the auction sites that are selling these guns makes it look like the gun was hand engraved and signed by Michael Collins, and perhaps some of them were. Now, we know for a fact that he did design the engraving, but these guns were production engraved in Morocco, so or in Japan by Morocco. So just be wary of someone asking a multi-$1,000 premium for a hand-engraved signed Michael Collins BPS. Try to get some provenance that it was in fact hand-engraved. The ones that I've looked at were very definitely machine engraved as far as the big scroll patterns. Possibly the bird inlays were hand done, maybe not. Now it's also probable that there were a few that Collins actually did hand engrave the entire scene, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't believe for a second that he sat there and hand engraved hundreds of Browning BPS shotguns, as well as the other stuff he did for Browning. I think it's kind of like in the art world, you look at an original versus a print. The print's still signed, right? So anyway, That's my take on that. They're great shotguns. The engraved guns do bring a little bit more. Just be wary of the hyperbole and be wary of the advertising when they're telling you it's hand engraved. So that's just my take on that. So anyway, the Browning BPS pump shotgun, they're not in production. They were discontinued 2024, no more being assembled. There still may be some new in the box guns out there, very late production that haven't sold yet on a dealer's shelf somewhere. There are not going to be any more of them. But the other thing I did want to bring out was the very early guns, the from 1977 up through the early 80s, there was a magazine cutoff feature, and we'll have a still photo that we can drop on there. It was a rotating lever right down here on the bottom where the magazine tube goes into the receiver, marked S and R, S for single shot, R for repeater, where you could actually lock out the magazine tube to allow you to change just the shell in the chamber. And you'd have to reload just the chamber the way I showed you just a minute ago. So yeah, I wanted to bring that up also. And I think we also have a still photo of the engraving of the engraved guns. Very good looking guns. Don't hesitate to pick one up if you can get it at a reasonable amount of money. If you can get it in the smaller gauges with the smaller receivers, the 28 gauge, the 410, if you like shooting sub gauge stuff, even the 20 gauge, it's a nicely handling shotgun. It's all steel. It's walnut. Nice bluing. Now, I'm not a big fan of their what they call the Hunter, which was a really, especially later in production, had a really coarse, almost a Cerakote looking finish. I'm sure it was something other than that, but I've never been a big fan of the camo wrap guns either, including in the BPS. But that said, those are still good shooting. They still shoot well. It's just, to me, it needs to be, if it's going to be a Browning BPS, it really needs to be blued steel and walnut. So just me. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. I probably should have said that earlier. Hit that like button. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you had any experience with that Browning BPS, how much you hate it, how much you love it. What they're going for in your area if you run across them. So drop a comment, let us know. We'll try to respond when we can, and we'll see you on the next one.